Okay, so with the cockpit out the way, that's all nicely done. We can put that to one side and move on generally. Now the next parts we've already got them together here. We've got the two intake halves. Now obviously we've got the big one for the air going in, and then it splits into two engines at the rear, which then blow out the back. And we have a plate here, if we can find, so we've done with it, here we are. We've got a plate here, which basically just fits in the back and covers the bottom engine. It's got a compressor blade on the bottom just for the bottom, because obviously that's the only one you can see when you're looking in it. You won't actually see the top one at all. So that's fair enough. So we've done that. At the same time, we've glued the halves for the tailpipe engines together so they can be drying at the moment. Okay, so the next thing we have to worry about is that the Lightning, due to its very large back end, if you like, it's actually a tail sitter. By tail sitter we mean it actually will roll back and sit up with the engine spacing the nose wheel in the air. So what we need to do is compensate that. So for that I've got a little bit of lead just bunged down there, and I've got an old leftover white metal undercarriage, and I've got a little steel rod here. So what I'm going to do, I use white glue, or your PVA glue. In this case I'm using a bit of gator glue. The reason for doing this is that over time, CA glue, or your super glues and things like that, are going to be likely to actually sort of turn back to powder and perhaps perish, and that way you end up with bits rolling around the inside of your model. So what we've done, we're just going to put some white glue in there, and just like that, then we've got this part here, this steel rod can fit in there, and it will marry up and go in the hole. And then we've just got the rake dome cap, which then clicks on the top. Got a little bit of PVA left over, but it all fits in there, and that is the weight. Now what you can do now, if you wanted to check, you could basically just tape up all the wings and that, pop it on, put your finger underneath where the undercarriage will be, and just see if it actually balances. You should be absolutely fine with it, got no problem with it at all. Just by filling that up should be enough to actually take it. Now at the same time we've done the little bit of photo etch work, which you can see in here. That's done, just lays down the back, very straightforward, just on your instructions, just follow it as it is, and that's done. So that takes care of this bit here. So what we can do, we can just pop a little bit of glue, extra thin, and just let the capillary action work its way around like that. So we just got a bit of a blob there. Okay, so we can put that to one side now to dry, up out the way. At the same time, obviously, there's a couple of things you can do. You've got the flapper-ons for the back of the actual, if you can pick them up, these here, sorry, the flapper-ons, wrong one, for the back. Now the thing is, there's two little ejector pin marks. You only have to, they're on both sides, but don't worry about the second one, because there's little locator tabs with that. So if you just get a sanding stick and just sand that off, just a touch, and get rid of those, and that way it'll just make it sit down. It doesn't have to be a perfect type of fit, because they don't stack up too much and they don't interfere. It's just that they just need taking down just a fraction, just like that. So what we do, we've got some extra thin, and we're just putting a blob, or just running it down around the insides, because obviously fitting it together a bit of a problem. Okay, two halves can go together, just like that. Okay, we're just going to drop a bit all in there. There we go. And we just give that a bit of a nudge. Now just to make sure it doesn't come off at the trailing edge, which is, to be honest, the one we're worried about, we're just going to put a couple of rubber pegs that I've got here, just nibbling onto the back edge, just like that. So we'll place that out of the way. I've already done one for the other side, to be honest, but we can do those. Now, with those bits done and drying, when you come back, what we need to do is paint the inside of these silver. Now, it's one of those ones you're not particularly going to be able to see it that easily. It's not something that you're going to be able to just look down and see at an intake. It's not like a white one, certainly on something big like an F16 or certainly an F15, something like that. This one, you've got the radome in the middle, which is going to fit in here. So as you can see, you know, you're not going to be able to see a lot down in there. You know, at the end of the day, it's going to cover it up. So what you can do is hand paint it if you wanted to, or just spray it silver. Personally, I'm just going to hand paint it with a little bit of Citadel paints. So what I do is, we've just got Citadels just like this. Quite a long brush. pick a brush here somewhere. That's the one. Okay. Then all we're going to do is just paint the inside. Now these Citadel paints, if you haven't used them before or haven't got them, these are the Games Workshop ones. And to be honest, they're absolutely lovely to paint with because you get hardly any brush marks in it at all. They cover extremely well. They can be airbrushed as well. You don't have to worry about it in your airbrush. So I'm not going to do down inside the inside of this wheel well, the nose one. I'm literally just doing the top bit, because what we can do is we can come along with our alclads as we're going to do this and paint all that a little bit later. So what we're doing is just any parts you can roughly see. Happy with that. Great thing also with Citadels, they don't take a million years to dry, which is always quite nice. So we just leave that to one side. At the same time, obviously we've got the fan that we'll see at the end. We'll just give that a bit of paint there. That was done, so we can leave that now to dry over at one side. At the same time, obviously these rear engine ones, you can spray these if you want to, or hand paint them. I'm going to basically spray these with a little bit of alclad, just to make them look a bit nice. Now, as you might be able to see in the end here, we've got one fit already, but there's a photo etch part that goes in. It's exactly the same as the fan blade itself. Pop that down. As you can see here, it's just the same, but obviously it's photo etch one, but you still use it, because when you look down from this end, hopefully you'll be able to actually see the blades of that little fan area, or say the engine area, just down there like that. So there we go, that's done. So what you can do, you can hand paint that, or you can spray it, whichever way you want to do it. It's personal choice. What I'm going to do with this one, I'm going to paint it roughly, just the same way as we're doing the others, just for the moment. And then what we're going to do, we're just going to come back with alclad and overspray. Because these Games Workshop colours, they are actually nice and glossy when they dry, alclad will stick to this very, very nicely. So there we go, there's one done just like that. And then we can let those dry. I'll do the other one, let it dry, and then we can get on with the wings. Okay, so now we can glue this engine back piece on. So that's straightforward. We've got the compressor blade down here at the back. That's just going to go in like this, up, hold in, bit of a push, take your glue, and as I do with the extra thin, let the capillary action do the work, and just run around absolutely everywhere. Make sure it's all square, covering both sides. There we go. So we can just leave that now off to one side. Now the big area to do now is the other set of wings. So what we've got, you've got the underside bit here, and there's a little bit of photo etch that goes on there. So what we're going to do, we can move some of these out of the way, clear some space. If we just cut the last remaining few little tabs of this out, and then what we can do, we can get this fitted on. Now it's very straightforward, but it's one of those things that just takes a little bit of time to line up and get right. So what we'll do, last one off of here, keeping it flat, remember, or as flat as possible. It just comes off like that. Now at the same time, you've also got another part, which is number 55 in this case, which is very straightforward. It's just a little bit of photo etch, just like that. And then what I've done is it just folds in half with the Tamiya pliers, just pull it over. So what I've got here is the underside of the wing, and this one here, it fits up in here. It just goes up in this area in here. So what we do, we take a little bit of the gator glue, okay, and we just smear that up and down quite level. Right, now I'm doing this sort of backwards to show you, so you sort of have to forgive me. So basically, if I can just sort of line this up, this one just sits in here. So we just place that in. Just goes in just like that. Then we'll get a bit of a nudge with a cocktail stick, just to make sure it's all in and okay. So that one's in absolutely fine. And then obviously, I've said before, you can use PE glue or PVA glue or like gator glue. But in this case, because it's a straightforward flat, this one here is just going to stick straight on the top. So what we're going to use is super glue. So we just get a drop more down here. And then what we'll do, we've got a cocktail stick, and we're just going to run it along all the bars and the areas, and avoiding that photo etch part we just put in. Don't want to ruin that yet. Okay, so we just get that all round all the areas, just like so. And this is a medium set one, so it should give us a little bit of time to get it on, but because it's, as I say, it is photo etch, it's going to be one of those ones where it goes on and then it isn't going to move anymore, so we're going to try and line it up as best we can. If we do with the bottom edge, there we go, happy with that. So we just hold that down, and then we've got some kicker here. Let's give it a spray and a push, just to hold all that in. And hopefully that will just work its way around. Now it's probably worth talking about whilst this is drying that obviously there is an Aries replacement resin one for this, which is absolutely lovely and detailed. But there is a slight drawback to it, is that what happens is you have to cut out this entire piece that we've done here, get rid of that, and then you actually put a resin one in. The trouble is you have to thin the wing to get that in, and literally it goes transparent. You can see physically through the wing to be able to get it to go down. And I know lots of modelers, including myself, who've gone too far and actually come through the top of the wing. So that's quite important to remember, is that, you know, obviously thinning it is one thing, but you have to make sure you've got enough plastic to work with. Otherwise, when you put your super glue, like you do on the top here, to fix it down, you end up melting through the plastic. So just be a little bit careful if you are using them. On a personal note, because I have been asked this, so you know, I'll give you my opinion. This detail that is here with the photo etch part gives it just about enough, what I would say, for a normal sort of standard display model with no problems at all, because it's under the wing. You're not going to pick it up to look under it. It'll be one of those things, you know it's there, but nobody else will, so to speak. So it's probably not worth, you know, sort of spending a lot of money unless you're going to be, you know, a stickler, you can afford it, or you really want to do it. But it's just one of those things. If you want to, by all means, please go ahead. You know, if you don't, then obviously you don't have to worry about it. Nobody's going to criticise anybody for not doing it. So I just found one little gap just to appear down the back here whilst we were talking. So we're just going to fix that with a little bit of glue now. So we just need to, just down this back edge. So what we do, we just place it, kick it, hold it. Because we're near an edge, I'm just going to hold it with a bit of metal so I don't stick my fingers to it, which is the normal way. So by just using a bit of metal like this, using pliers, a knife, anything, it just stops your fingers, because obviously you can get it off by just rolling it away like that. If I use my fingers and you get the glue under it, you pull it off, you end up taking it with you. There we go, that's there in now. Quite nice, nice detail, all the rest of it, and it's really what we need. So there we go, it livens it up enough without causing too many problems, and trust me, it's a lot quicker using this stuff than it is using the resin set. Quite simple now, the wing sections go over the top. So obviously we'll just fix this one in, so we just use our normal glue, touch, and let the capillary action flow around to everywhere. Touch more, goes all the way down and does the job. So what we do, we just borrow a peg, making sure the peg steps over the gap, as I say, where you've got the gap, and that way you don't get a glue print in the middle of it. And then what we can do is we can do down in here as well. So we're just going to glue down there. I'm pulling it up, and the capillary action should run along. If not, just tap and let that happen. Okay, then obviously this back area here, as you can see here on the close-up, we will actually leave that for a bit. We'll come back and glue that shortly. And then what we've got is, we do the front edge first. Same thing, we're just going to pop down in here, put the glue and let it run down. Inside it will flow down, and as you can see it bubbling up. So we just hold that there. Okay. Happy with that, and also we'll just come along the rest of the wing joint. Here we go. So if we just grab a peg, Put that one down there. And there we have it. That bit's done quite nicely. Quite happy with the way that is. Now over here I've got one I did earlier. That one's all dried and finished now. Obviously it's got the part in there in the middle. All nice, ready to go. Now you can see you've got a gap down here. Now you have a choice for these little leading edge. They look like slats that you'd find on a modern jet, but actually they're not what it is. There's just different types, obviously for this and what's known as the F6, which is the later variant to this. But basically these go on and they're going to clip in just like so, just on the front there. Very straightforward. So same again, just give it a drop with the glue. We just pull it back and forth a little bit, just like that. Hopefully not dropping in like we did there. There we go. That just helps it go. And then we just drop. I don't know if you saw it there, but the capillary action worked very well and just zipped off both directions. So we just make sure we're all in. Down the other end. What we do, we just let this get a bit of a bite, like we're to there, and then we can add more glue in. Leading edge, a little trick, if I hold it up like this, what you do, if you just tap the underside, it will find the gap up there and get it. If you do it this way, you put it on, it might run down the sides, which is a bit of a horrible situation to be in. So if you do the front and you hold it in a downwards position, it just stops that. So what we're going to do, we're going to gently hold this together without gluing the rest of our fingers. It doesn't matter so much if this leading edge is a bit of a mess, because obviously we can come back and fix this up afterwards. So it's one of those jobs where it gets a bit messy. Perhaps you might get a fingerprint in it, things like that, usual bits and pieces. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab my spring-loaded clamps and we're just going to pop them over the middle area. What this will do is help push down the top and keep it all sort of level as it runs down. I should have another one in here somewhere. Some clamps. And we'll see what we'll do. We're just going to put these on and just clip them down. Okay, so as you can see, we've got this the centre radome, which is the part which goes inside the air intake. Obviously the back part's just painted silver, as we said, and what we've done is just masked up the radome. Now this is the radome area. Obviously depending on the age, a lot like modern radomes on F-16s and F-15s, things like that, depending on how old they are and how well looked after, will depend a lot on how they're actually, the fading and things like that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off with an olive drab, straight out the bottle, XF62 Tamiya. So what we got here, air. So we're just going to pour it neat straight into the colour cup. We're not going to need an awful lot, and we're just going to spray this about 35 psi neat onto this radome, and then what we can do, we can have a look at it, see how it is, and then if we want to, we can weather this up a little bit by fading it and things like that. So just to start with, we'll just give it this green all the way round. And because it's neat, it's going to dry very, very quickly. So we just give it a nice thick coat. Okay, just cutting to air now, just drying it down. You know, this particular one, the thing is with it, I want it to be nice and be extremely shiny and well looked after. I'm not going to heavy weather this one because I just want a lovely metal finish, if you like. So what I'm probably going to do is leave this just as it is. So just pop that over there in the holder. Turn the compressor off, and we can whip this off and have a quick look of how it is. Having a hard time trying to grab it all. Just like so, and then we've just got a little tab just under here around that front part. And there we go. So there we go, that gives us our radome, just like that. Okay, so now we've got these sub-assemblies done, obviously got the wings done, tail done. What we can actually do is bring the two halves together. Now I've used a little bit of CA glue with some kicker, really, to just get this going and get on with it a lot quicker. Now normally if you were to glue them in place, use plenty of glue in these areas because you don't want them moving around, let them dry off and then bring the other half in. So they're pretty easy to line up and get all sorted. So they're all in. So what we're going to do then is just put the other half on. And all we're going to do really is have a good look and see where it's fitting very nicely and sitting. And obviously all down the spine seems okay, all round the back. This seems to be all okay. A little bit of a push needed along the bottom. Obviously it's where we've got the air intakes and around there. So we've got no problems. But if you was to be looking, probably down the spine is the easiest one. And all of a sudden you've got a gap. You know, it goes along quite nice and there's a gap. There's usually a good reason. Perhaps you've got a little bit of sprue peg still sticking up, something like that. So they're the ones you want to eliminate. Because we're doing a long seam line that's very, very noticeable, and there's a certain amount of detail with it that runs down this spine. Obviously, the neater you can make this join now, the better it'll be. Because otherwise, if it's not a neat join, what we're going to end up with is like having to do a lot of filling and a lot of sanding and all this detail along the spine. You're going to lose and have to rescribe, and then it will look like a bit of a problem. This way, a gentle coat of extra thin down there, and then we'll just touch in a little few bit of the lines, which we'll show you in a moment. We'll take care of that. Same with the belly. It's a little bit more. I have got one small little one just down here. So what we're going to do, we're just going to take quite a fine sanding stick, nothing over the top because we don't want to dig in too deep, and we're just going to make a couple of broad passes along the bottom, just like that on one, same on the other, but don't really push down, just let the side-by-side action take care of it, and then that way it should sand them off quite nicely. So if we bring these halves together and have a look now along that centre belly, as you can see down here, no problems at all now, so that's all okay. Now obviously there's a couple of ways of doing this. You can just clamp it, you can rubber band it up and all the rest of it. So if we just use some, I've got some pegs here, which are quite nice. So that's on. What we're going to do, same as I do my other ones, I'm going to start in an area, so we use the spine, let that dry off for about 20 minutes, come back and do all the other areas and work around. Instead of doing it in one big one, I like to do it. So what we're going to do with this seat and back line, we're going to just make sure that we're all lined up, because sometimes if you get a bit of misalignment with the actual areas, so we're just going to push those together a little bit. We're going to take our extra thin, and all we're going to do is literally just tap it and let it follow along. Now we're not flooding it because obviously we don't want it running down the side and causing headaches and things like that, but certainly we want enough to make sure it's all in absolutely everywhere, plenty of it. Now what you can do, a little trick I do, turn it upside down, plenty of it, and what you do, you pull and drag your brush off so it all flows down the inside parts, just like that. So we'll let those go, and we'll just do down the back here, then we'll get a rubber band on. But if you sort of blend it on your thing, tap it. Now this one down the back here, where you can see it, but it's actually out of alignment, so what we're going to do is gently nudge that so it's perfect. Come along with another peg, just to hold that in place. Put too much on there. And there we go. So what we're going to do, we'll leave that 20 minutes, come back, do the other areas and go right the way round, and then I'll show you about actually taking care of the seam lines. Okay, so as you can see, we've got the actual sides together and we've put the tail on. The other thing as well, we've put on the little back of the canopy area, just in like that. Bit of super glue needed there because it was a little bit too wide, so we just put a bit of super glue in and we'll sand that down and make that look all a lot nicer a little bit later on. So as you can see, we've got the seam lines done, and they're basically all okay. There's nothing too much over the top. Now the big thing is you want to do is let it dry. If you're using a liquid poly cement like this, what happens is basically it's melting both sides of the plastic together. If you don't let it totally dry, what will happen is when you're sanding it, as you're sanding with your sanding stick, you actually end up pulling out soft plastic, if you like, and it will literally just pull out and it will make it not very nice. Now, a couple of things to point out as we're doing, you can probably see here on the close-up that we've got these little dips that appear. Now, this is classic. What it actually is that it's just quite not close enough and it's pinching. And what's happened is some of the areas it's managed to weld up, some areas it hasn't. Now, there's two ways to actually get around this problem. One is to use a little bit of a thicker glue and just touch in those little areas, or just come along with the poly, liquid poly, like we've done here, and just literally touch it into those little areas. Now the thing you want to do is give it a little bit of a poke to get rid of any air bubbles that are caught, because obviously you've put the glue on top. If there's an air bubble, you're just going to end up back with it. Another little coat like that, give it another half an hour, come back and you should be okay. But as you see on the close-up, you can still see them in there, but as it melts it will go white and away you go. So assuming that you're all happy with it and that your gaps aren't too big, you know, so that you've had to take care of a problem like that, but you've still got, you might be able to see in here on the close-up, a little bit of a trench going on, a little bit not very nice down there. So it's what we call, you know, a non-perfect seam, which, let's face it, is pretty much standard. What I tend to use then, a bit grubby this bottle, I'm afraid, is a bottle of Mr. Surfacer. Now you've probably seen me do the one on making your own. Now literally in here, as you can see, it's slightly separated. All we've got is green putty, this is Squadron's green putty, straight in, put a load in, and then basically put in a cellulose or a lacquer thinner, mix it up, and away you go. Now this is great for doing real hard to get areas and big filler jobs that need it. Drawback to this is it takes a little while to dry, and then obviously you've got to do a bit of sanding afterwards. By using a Mr. Surfacer, something like this, what we do comes in 4 particular strengths. Obviously you've got a medium, a thick, and a thin. This is the 1000, you've obviously got a 500, then there's a 1000, and I think then it's the 5000 or the 2000. Can't remember off the top of my head, I'm sorry, but there we go. So what we do, we give a bit of a mix, and basically what you get is this stuff. Now this is, for all intents and purposes, liquid putty, but it's more like paint. Now the beauty with this stuff is it gives a great finish once it's on. Now what you want to do is take an oldish paintbrush. You don't want anything too new, but what you do, you're going to come along and then you just, brush goes in, and all we do is brush it along the seam line. Now this is great if you've got any little imperfections such as we've got here. Okay, then all we do, we're just going to run this quite liberally down any lines. Now the great thing with this stuff also is it dries very quickly, and when it dries quick it means you can literally get on and you're not there being held up. So what we're going to do is going to pop it in everywhere just like that. Then once it's dried you can come back, give it another coat, so forth and so on. So we're just going to go quite a bit around this top edge. Any big areas of detail like heavy duty riveting, things like that, you want to really avoid, because otherwise it does tend to give you the situation where perhaps you're going to make more of a mess than you would if you just left it. But as I say, nice thing with this, it does fill very nicely. It just gives it a nice smooth overall finish. So what we'll do, we're going to let this dry. Now this to dry was going to take approximately about half an hour. It might take a bit longer by obviously the different thicknesses you have on. But there again, like all sanding and filling, make sure it's totally dry before you come along and attempt to get it off. Otherwise you're going to end up rolling it away. So we're going to give this a couple of minutes just to go off, and then we can have a look at this tail section on there to see how it's going, and if it's going to need any. We might use some of the Mr. Surfacer in there, but hopefully we can come along and then we can have a look at the sanding.